To this day. To this day.
Rich people don't sleep 8 hours a day.
That's stupid. Use your common sense.
Hi, I'm Bushido Spirit. This is Euphoria Season 1, Episode 7, The Trials and Tribulations of Trying to Pee While Depressed. This episode was a resident sleeper, not because I was bored, but because it's 80% bedroom scenes. Everyone is just lounging around. This is the calm before the storm. Euphoria season finale. Everyone's waiting in anticipation. I'm excited. So let's jump right into the breakdown. But before I get into that, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also hit that notification icon to let you know when I drop videos. Let's start with Cassie. This was her episode. So Cassie's father was extremely handsome. So handsome, women would just leapfrog over her mother onto his dick. But it was cool. He still loved her mother, as well as all the women in the neighborhood. Despite his infidelity, he was a solid father. He encouraged Cassie to follow her dreams. Go on, baby. Be an ice skater. Psych, can't afford that. It's the roller rink for you. Cassie's dreams of becoming Tonya Harding were dashed. Beaten and bruised like Nancy Kerrigan's leg. Her father could not foot the bill. He stopped encouraging her. Then puberty hit, and her parents' relationship became increasingly strained. Her father struggled to keep decent work, and her mother turned to alcoholism. She wasn't left without attention, however. As her body filled out, more boys, men, and creepy uncles came in for the hug instead of a handshake. She was perfect. And as time went on, her parents' marriage could no longer bend. The splinters started to show, till it snapped. One night before 9th grade, it was finally over. And rumors started to swarm about her mother's infidelity. For a while, Cassie hated her mother for it, but eventually got over it. After all, her father cheated first. Though the marriage was over, he still found time to see his daughter. He visited on the weekends, then every other weekend, then once a month, then not at all. Cassie was worried. Rightfully so. One night he got into a car crash. Cassie stayed by his bedside. Doctors said he'd never walk again, but they were wrong. He walked. Yep, right into a meth house. The pain from the crash, the pain from life was unbearable. Meth made things easier. He'd text Cassie from time to time, but he eventually stopped, just like before the crash, and when he couldn't afford her ice skating lessons. But Cassie still loved him. She wondered where he went or what happened, till one night he showed up, and Cassie was happy to see him, but he was different. The meth took its toll on him, and he only swung through to steal from her house to support his habit. She allowed it, however. It was her dad. She hadn't seen him for a while, but just as quickly as he raided her house for needles, precious metals, and bubblegum, he was gone, leaving Cassie yearning for another glimpse, more time. But no, others had to fill that void. So she fell in love with every guy she dated, and they stole as well. Just like her father that night, they stole her innocence, her dignity. She just didn't want to be alone. And most guys she was with took advantage of that weakness. She allowed them to record her. And when the relationship finally ended, they shared the videos one by one. Then she met McKay. Fast forward to current day, Cassie is pregnant. I know, shocking. But do others know? And how will this affect her relationship with McKay going forward? Cassie confides in her sister, but Lexi's not experienced. She doesn't have thought privilege. Pretty hurts. All her energy is put into looking happy and not actually being happy. Her life's in shambles, and all she can hope for is shallow comments from onlookers. You're perfect, Cassie. Fair like porcelain, just like porcelain. Beautiful on the outside, but fragile and empty. And no one understands, not even Lexi. Attention is a double-edged sword. It's gratifying yet suffocating. Cassie has no choice but to call the lot. Legion of Thoughts. Maddie, Kat, and what's-her-face World Star for a meeting. Cassie wants to tell McKay she made out with Daniel twice. Maddie immediately shuts that idea down. What? Cassie responds. It's not like I cheated. Maddie counters. Kissing's worse. What? I said so to myself. What kind of logic is this? What you really trying to say is that you fucked a lot of niggas. To each his own, I guess. Obviously, there wasn't anything intimate about her kiss with Daniel. She was high both times. Maddie continues, however. If anyone brings it up, you deny. Cassie says, I don't want us to end up like my parents. Then Kat jumps in. I wouldn't worry about it, Cassie. Men are like band-aids, they wear out. Sometimes you need a fresh one to cover up the hole. Maddie gets frustrated and finally calls Kat out. I'm sick of this stuck-up apathetic bullshit. You're supposed to be the fat ugly friend with no life that's encouraging and funny, like Melissa McCarthy. But Kat has great defense. Bitch, you're dating Charles Manson. Every encounter is a life and death experience. The two continue to argue. Kat eventually storms out. More to discuss with that later, once we get to Kat's part. Anyway, the council meeting was concluded. Cassie ends up talking to Lex anyway. She says, lying hurts more than telling the truth. One interesting thing about this conversation is, both come from the same broken household, but have entirely different outlooks on life. This may be due to the fact that Cassie was closer to her father, and him leaving affected her more. Also, the amount of attention she received as a kid. Lexi seems bothered by it, but not enough to hate her sister. The two discuss Cassie's relationship with McKay and Daniel. Lexi thinks the situation is ridiculous. In Cassie's mind, it's normal to entertain multiple guys at the same damn time, and if you're not doing so, you're shy. She clearly has daddy issues, and so does Maddie, both manifested in different ways. Cassie is easily taken advantage of because of her need for validation. Maddie hates being alone, so she is willing to be abused to prevent that. Both were talented as kids, but unforeseen circumstances led them to their current predicament. Anyway, Cassie decides to tell Chris, cause lying hurts more than the truth, so she does. But not about Daniel. She tells him about the pregnancy. Chris is speechless at first. Then he suggested she get an abortion because he's more concerned about his football career. Cassie obviously wants to have the child, but she's a pushover. All she could say to counter him was, what if this is supposed to be what I do with my life? And that's fucked up. Like Maddie, her whole life is her relationship, when before she had aspirations. The episode ends with Cassie asking her mother for help, probably to get that abortion. She didn't tell anyone about the baby but Chris and her mother. Let's move on to Rue. This is one of my favorite Rue episodes. It's extremely eccentric, primarily because the structure of it is built around her bipolar disorder. A seesaw of emotion, at times depression, deep in self-reflection, mundane. Other times she's manic, extremely energetic, and the show shifts into uncanny, surreal moments. The episode changes into a 90s detective show at one point. They've done this before with the dick pic breakdown, but this by far was my favorite. This episode, Rue is lying in bed depressed. She's been there for what seems like days, watching reruns of Love Island. Maybe it was Jules' absence from school and the 50-something ignored text she sent. Rue knows something is up, and rather than be conventional, the show decides to have a little fun. And this is where we get the 90s detective skit, film grain and all. All I could think of was 7, but it could be in reference to something else. Or many, like Rue suggested. Anyway, Rue is manic during these scenes, and is really talking to Lexi on the phone from her bedroom. This was a creative way to let the audience know that Rue has figured it out. She knows what's going on between Jules and Nate. She pretty much got everything right, except the reason Jules helped. She helped for the same reason Tyler did. She is also being blackmailed. But that's not something Rue could know, because Jules never told her. But Lexi doesn't buy it, any of it, because Rue has a mental disorder, which is fucked up but true, and she is in a manic state. After that scene ends, then we switch back to Rue lying in bed depressed. She just lays there and only gets up to eat, which is kind of odd because she doesn't go to pee. Anyway, one day she comes out the room and she sees her mother's new boyfriend, Rick. Rick gets a little too personal, trying to relate, and Rue reads the shit out of him, calmly tells him to fuck himself and that her mother can do better. I agree. Your mother is fine. I'll be your daddy. Rue is back in her manic state, so she goes to visit Fez. She's worked out a plan in her head to save Jules from Nate. She wants Fez to threaten Nate with a gun. Fez rightfully calls her crazy. During this conversation, Mouse, Fez's drug dealer, calls. He's minutes away. Fez tells Rue to remain in the back room while he talks to Mouse in the living room. He wants to avoid what happened last time, fentanyl. While Rue sits in the back room, Fez talks to Mouse. Mouse wants Fez to sell more drugs, more than he has. Fez declines, but Mouse doesn't take no for an answer. Meanwhile, Rue sits in the back room. She spots pills on the table. They make her a bit uncomfortable. She's been drug-free for a while now, and it just gets weirder. The pills start talking to her. So to avoid relapse, she sneaks out the room, then the apartment, while Fez negotiates with Mouse. Fez ends up losing that negotiation. Mouse fronts him more drugs to sell. We'll get to that later. Rue's manic state ends and depression starts again. Rue tries to remember what made her happy in the first place. She tries to hold on to memories of Jules, but those memories only add to her depressed state. Let's fast forward a bit. Fez, being a real friend, tells Nate to leave Rue and her friends alone. He threatens to harm Nate if he doesn't. Nate doesn't seem bothered, however. The episode ends for Rue, with her lying helplessly on the floor, with the bladder full of piss. Her depression levels were through the roof. It left her paralyzed. She'd been holding her pee for hours, to the point of damaging her kidneys. Rue attempts to make it to the bathroom but collapses. Her mother eventually helps her out, but that whole scenario was scary. She tells her mother, "I think I need to go back on medication." But her mother ensures her everything is fine. Will Rue relapse? Will Fez go to prison? Or will he just kill Nate for fucking up his business? Find out on the next episode of Euphoria. Alright, moving on to Jules. So her episode opens up with the lady from the police department saying Happy Halloween, which made my antenna go up. Did the woman think she was wearing a costume? They showed this same scene last week and again this week, like it has some sort of significance. Was she being misgendered? Anyway, Jules didn't go to school for weeks. The Nate thing fucked her up. She needed a break, a real break. So she left town to visit an old friend, TC, who I assume is a trans man or butch lesbian, I'm not sure. TC has a girlfriend named Anna. Her and Jules get close, real close. They end up fucking. Not before a conversation though. Jules says, "If I can conquer men, then I've conquered femininity," which explains why she fucks a lot of dudes. She's unable to have normal relationships, so she settles for cheap thrills at hotels to feel more like a woman. Anna responds, "Bitch, that's crazy. Why do you need a guy to make you feel more feminine?" Damn, mind blown. It's the concept that even cishet women like Maddie and Cassie struggle with. Maybe Jules' reluctance to be with Rue is based on heteronormative views on gender. Jules never really thought about it in that way. And I don't know if Anna was being helpful or trying to find a way to fuck Jules. Either way, this only helps Rue. And it turns out that trip was just what Jules needed. She realizes the error of her ways and decides to finally text Rue. But Rue wasn't near her phone at the time. She had just collapsed from pee buildup. Thickums is still putting it down. She smashes Chad Daniels' cheeks at the party, her 6th grade ex. Her and Daniel talk a bit afterward. Kat says, "I always thought I was going to lose my virginity to you." But Daniel doesn't even remember her, which is terrible because that relationship kind of made her who she is. It started the conquest. He's the reason she doesn't trust anyone. Damn, Daniel. What was an important moment in her life turns out to be meaningless to someone else. Daniel only wanted to smash because Cassie was being Harry Houdini with the box. So Kat, in a way, kind of takes another L from Daniel. Also this episode, Kat had a huge fight with Maddie. That shit made her cry. She realized what her value was. She's the Rebel Wilson of the group. Fat jokes and pratfalls to lighten the mood. Someone who lives vicariously through her friends because she doesn't have a life of her own. And when she finally does get a life, they don't want to deal with her anymore. Maddie probably only hung out with her to massage her own ego. Makes you wonder, had she been this confident from the beginning, would they have allowed her to tag along like a puppy in a purse? Anyway, after that spat, it's back to business for Kat. She finally gives in to the guy begging for a session. He had bought her whole Amazon wish list, and he's paying $300 for 30 minutes. Come on. It starts off strange. The guy doesn't show his face at all. Clearly a cop. Or it could just be Nate. That nigga's evil. He needs a prayer and holy water. The camera is completely blacked out. And he appears to have a voice changer on some Batman shit. And Kat is Catwoman? The guy is extremely demanding, more than what Kat is used to. Before this, she had always been in control, but he seems to be in control now. Pussy's power, but money's omnipotent. The guy starts to breathe heavily as Kat strips naked for him. He then tells her to call him special.
Call me special.
She hesitates at first, but eventually does it. Money's involved. It's super degrading and eerie for Kat. When the session ended, she immediately closes the laptop. Kat got exposed this episode, and I'm not just talking about her session with Batman. Daniel gave her an L, Maddie gave her an L, and voice changer guy did what is equivalent to sliding a credit card down her ass cheek. Her armor is finally being cracked. Her current lifestyle is pushing people away, and it could only get worse from here.
Hello? Yeah, I'd like to report a crime.
And finally, let's talk about Nate. Nate doesn't do much this episode, cause he really doesn't have to. Everyone is still responding to what he did before, though he did have a couple run-ins, one with his father and the other with Fez. Nate doesn't seem to have the same admiration for his father he once did. Kyle attempts to talk to him in the hallway. Nate sorta hits him with his shoulder as he walks past. Kyle knows Nate choked Maddie and wonders how he managed to get out the situation. He doesn't want to scold him, he just hopes his son didn't learn the wrong lesson, which is exactly what happened. Fez confronts him, but Nate is unbothered. He calls Fez retarded, a nobody, and it makes sense that he feels that way. He was able to successfully sidestep serious issues with no problem. What is a threat from a local drug dealer? And this goes back to what his father said. Nate seems to be on top of the world. He learned that he was invincible, that he can get away with anything. And this version of Nate scares me. If he doesn't respect his father, the man that taught him everything, then who? Who will he listen to now? I mean, Fez threatened to shoot him, and Nate just goes home and calls the cops. He always has a plan, but a plan is just a plan. Sometimes there's consequences. People are out for revenge, and it may catch up to you. That's it, guys. That is my review of Euphoria, episode 7. What did you think of the review? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Did I miss a couple things? Feel free to say that in the comments section below. I'll catch you on the next one.